The rain was coming. Patrick could smell it in the air, that metallic scent that meant they had maybe 20 minutes before the sky opened up. He pushed the wheelchair faster, his white cane sweeping side to side across the cracked sidewalk. "Careful," Kyle's voice came from the chair. "Pothole 3 feet ahead. Slight right." Patrick adjusted course without breaking stride. After 4 years of this, Kyle's directions were as natural as breathing. Kyle was the eyes, Patrick was the legs. That's how they survived. "The shelter?" Patrick asked, though he already knew the answer. "Let's try. Take a left here." They'd been walking since dawn, trying to scrape together enough for dinner, a few dollars from helping unload a delivery truck, some change from returning bottles. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. The Crossroads shelter was 12 blocks away. Patrick's arms ached from pushing Kyle all day, but he'd never complain. Kyle couldn't move anything below his neck. Patrick's pain was temporary. Kyle's was forever. "How's it look?" Patrick asked as they approached the shelter. "There's a line, a long one." Kyle paused. "I don't think we're getting in tonight." Patrick's heart sank, but he kept his voice steady. "We've slept outside before. It's going to rain, though. Then we'll get wet. Won't be the first time." They moved away from the shelter, Kyle directing Patrick toward the commercial district where there might be an awning, an alcove, somewhere with a little protection. Patrick was 22 years old. Kyle was 18. They'd been on the streets together for 4 years now, since Patrick aged out of foster care and took guardianship of his younger brother. 4 years of this. Sometimes it felt like 40. "There," Kyle said. "Old bank building, boarded up. There's a recessed doorway on the right side, deep enough to keep us mostly dry." Patrick found it with his cane, maneuvered the wheelchair into the space. It wasn't much concrete, cold, smelling of urine and cigarettes, but it would do. It had to. He set the brake on Kyle's wheelchair and sank down beside it, his back against the door. The first drops of rain started to fall. "Did you eat today?" Kyle asked. "Had half that sandwich at lunch." "That was my half. Did you eat your half?" Patrick didn't answer. "Patrick, I wasn't that hungry." "You're lying." "I'm fine, Kyle." A long silence. Then, "I hate this." "I know. You should have left me. You could have." "Don't." Patrick's voice was sharp. "Don't ever say that. You could have had a life. Instead, you're stuck with me, sleeping in doorways, going hungry. You're my brother. You're my life. End of discussion." Kyle was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Remember when we used to imagine what we'd be when we grew up?" Patrick smiled despite everything. "You wanted to be an astronaut, even after I couldn't walk. I figured they'd make an exception for someone who memorized the entire solar system. You did memorize it. You memorized everything. Fat lot of good it does me now." The rain picked up, drumming on the pavement, but they stayed mostly dry in their alcove. Patrick could hear it without seeing it, the way the world became liquid sound when you were blind. He'd been without sight for so long now that he barely remembered what rain looked like. Just the sound. Just the smell. "Patrick?" "Yeah? We're going to be okay, right?" Patrick reached up, found Kyle's arm, squeezed gently. "We're together. That means we're already okay." Kyle laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." They sat in silence, listening to the rain. Patrick felt exhaustion pulling at him, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from simply surviving. But Kyle was alive beside him. They were together. That was something. That was everything. "It hasn't always been like this," Kyle said quietly. "Well, actually, maybe it has, just in different ways." And Patrick knew his brother was thinking about the same thing he was thinking about, the past, how they got here. The long, winding road that led two brothers to a doorway in the rain. Patrick's first memory was sunlight. He must have been 3 or 4 years old, playing in a backyard that seemed enormous. His mother laughing at something his father said. The smell of hamburgers on a grill. The feeling that the world was safe and good and permanent. He'd been born perfectly healthy. A normal delivery, a normal baby. His parents, Jennifer and Michael, had been thrilled. Their first child? They took photos of everything. First smile, first steps, first words. Patrick saw those photos later, before his vision left him completely. His parents looked young and happy and full of hope. For 4 years, Patrick was the center of their universe. Then Kyle was born. Patrick remembered the day they brought his baby brother home from the hospital. Patrick had been 4 years old, bouncing with excitement, eager to meet this new person. Kyle had been tiny, red-faced, screaming. Patrick thought he was perfect. "You have to be gentle," his mother said, showing Patrick how to hold the baby. "He's your little brother. You're going to protect him always." Patrick took the job seriously. For 3 years, life was good. Different than before, louder, more chaotic. Less attention on Patrick, but still good. They were a family. They went to parks and had birthday parties and took trips to the beach. Patrick remembered teaching Kyle to build sandcastles, the feeling of his little brother's hand in his. Then Kyle got sick. It started with Kyle tripping more than usual. He was 3 years old, an age when toddlers fall all the time, so at first nobody worried. But then he stopped being able to get back up. Then he stopped being able to stand at all. Patrick remembered his mother crying on the phone with the doctor, his father pacing the kitchen, running his hands through his hair over and over, Kyle in a hospital bed, looking small and scared, not understanding why his legs wouldn't work anymore. The diagnosis came back: transverse myelitis, inflammation of the spinal cord. They didn't know what caused it, maybe a virus, maybe an immune response, maybe just terrible luck. But the damage was done. Kyle's legs were paralyzed. Then, over the next few weeks, it spread. His arms stopped working, his hands, everything below his neck, gone. Kyle was 3 years old, and he would never walk again. Never feed himself, never dress himself, never be independent. Patrick's parents brought Kyle home in a wheelchair. The house had to be reorganized, ramps installed, special equipment purchased. Kyle needed help with everything: eating, bathing, using the bathroom. It was endless and exhausting and expensive. And the fighting started. At first it was quiet, behind closed doors. Patrick would wake up at night and hear his parents' voices, low and angry. Then it got louder. Then they stopped waiting until the boys were asleep. "Your family has a history of autoimmune disorders." "My family? What about yours?" "Your uncle had." "This isn't about blame." "Then stop blaming me." Patrick, 7 years old, would sit in his room with his hands over his ears, trying not to hear. But he heard everything. How his father thought they should put Kyle in a facility. How his mother thought that was monstrous. How his father said they couldn't afford this. How his mother said they'd find a way. And then came the threats. "If you can't handle this, then maybe I should leave," his father said one night. "Fine, leave, but I'm taking Patrick." "You're taking Patrick? He's my son too. And I'm leaving Kyle with you? That's what you want, isn't it?" "That's not what You want the healthy child. Admit it. You want to walk away from Kyle. I want to walk away from all of this. But if I leave, I'm taking Patrick. You can keep Kyle if you want to destroy your life." Patrick heard that through his bedroom door. He looked across the room to where Kyle slept in his special bed, unaware of what was being said about him. Kyle was 4 years old. He deserved parents who loved him. They both did. The fights continued, each parent threatening to leave, to take Patrick, to leave Kyle with the other one, both claiming it wasn't their fault, both wanting the good child, the one who could walk and play and have a normal life. Patrick started spending more time with Kyle, reading to him, sitting with him, trying to make up for what their parents were failing to provide. Patrick was 7, but he understood that his little brother needed someone. If their parents wouldn't be there, Patrick would be. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Saturday. Their mother had asked Patrick to take Kyle outside, get them both out of the house. Another fight was brewing. Patrick could feel it in the air like electricity before a storm. He pushed Kyle in his adaptive stroller through the park. Kyle was pointing at birds. at dogs, at clouds. Kyle had always been observant, always noticing everything. Even at 4 years old, his mind was sharp. It was just his body that didn't work. Patrick was tired. He'd been tired a lot lately, with all the fighting at home, all the tension. He wasn't paying close enough attention. His foot caught on a crack in the sidewalk. He fell forward, trying to catch himself. But his momentum was all wrong. He went down hard, his head striking the concrete path with a sickening crack. Kyle started screaming. Patrick lay there, stunned, the world spinning, blood running down his face. Someone called an ambulance. The doctor said he had a concussion, but would be fine. They stitched up the cut on his forehead, sent him home with instructions to rest. But something was wrong. Over the next few weeks, Patrick started having trouble seeing. Everything was getting darker. Like someone was slowly turning down the lights. Colors faded to gray. Details blurred and disappeared. Back to the hospital. More tests. Specialists flown in. The doctors were baffled. There was damage to the optic nerves, but they couldn't explain how or why. The fall hadn't directly injured his eyes. There was no clear physiological cause. But Patrick's vision was deteriorating rapidly, and they couldn't stop it. It's not related to the fall, they told his parents. It's likely a separate condition, possibly genetic. But Patrick knew better. He'd been fine before the fall. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Whether the doctors could explain it or not, Patrick was going blind because he'd fallen while pushing his brother. His parents' reaction was worse than when Kyle got sick. Both of them? His mother sobbed. How can both of them be? This is your fault, his father said. Your genes. My genes? You're the one who... We'll never have healthy children. Never. Then maybe we shouldn't have children at all. The fights reached a crescendo. Patrick, his vision fading by the day, would sit with Kyle in their shared room and try to stay calm. Kyle would ask what the shouting was about. Patrick would make up stories. Anything but the truth. By age 8, Patrick was almost completely blind. He could see vague shapes, light and darkness, nothing more. He learned to navigate by memory and sound and touch. He learned to read Braille. He learned to need help for things he'd done independently his whole life. And then, one evening, their parents didn't come home. Patrick and Kyle waited. Patrick couldn't see the clock, but he knew it was late. Kyle was hungry. Patrick made peanut butter sandwiches by feel, brought one to Kyle, helped him eat it. They waited all night. In the morning, there was a knock at the door. Social services. Neighbors had called, worried about the children left alone. The social worker found a note on the kitchen table. Patrick didn't read it himself. He couldn't see it, but the social worker read it aloud, her voice tight with anger and pity. We can't do this anymore. We tried. God knows we tried. But we can't be parents to children who will never be whole. Someone else will have to take care of them. Someone stronger than us. We're sorry. That was it. No name signed. No forwarding information. Just 2 children, one blind, one paralyzed, left behind like broken toys. Patrick was 8 years old. Kyle was 4. And their real struggle had only just begun. The foster system didn't know what to do with them. 2 boys, both with significant disabilities, both traumatized by abandonment. They needed a family with resources, patience, and specialized knowledge. Those families were rare, and the ones that existed usually couldn't handle both brothers together. So Patrick and Kyle moved from home to home, sometimes together, sometimes apart. Each separation was agony. Patrick would lie awake at night, wondering if Kyle was okay, if someone was feeding him properly, if he was scared. Kyle would have nightmares and cry out for Patrick, for the brother who had always been there. The system kept trying to reunite them. There was something about their bond that even the most jaded social workers recognized. These brothers needed each other in a way that went beyond typical sibling connection. They were each other's survival. The homes varied. Some were decent people overwhelmed by the reality of caring for 2 disabled children. Some were just collecting checks and doing the bare minimum. A few were actively cruel. Patrick was bullied in school. Blind boy, blind boy, can't see where he's going. Kids would move things, make him trip, laugh when he stumbled. He learned to keep his head down, stay quiet, not make trouble. Kyle had it worse. Kids mocked his wheelchair, his inability to move. In one home, the foster parents' biological children used Kyle as target practice, throwing things at him because he couldn't dodge or defend himself. Kyle couldn't even wipe away his own tears. Patrick learned to fight back. He couldn't see, but he could hear, and when someone hurt his brother, Patrick would swing blindly until he connected. He got in trouble a lot, got moved a lot, but he didn't care. Nobody hurt Kyle while Patrick was around. Through it all, they developed their system. Kyle became Patrick's eyes. He would describe everything, the layout of a new room, where furniture was placed, who was approaching, what their expressions showed. Kyle's memory was extraordinary. He could memorize floor plans after one explanation, remember every detail, guide Patrick perfectly through any space. Patrick became Kyle's hands and legs. He would move Kyle's wheelchair, position him comfortably, feed him, help him with all the physical things Kyle couldn't do himself. Patrick learned to read Kyle's needs before Kyle even expressed them. They became a unit, incomplete separately, but together they were whole. The years passed. Patrick turned 12, 14, 16. Kyle grew from a small child to a teenager. They survived. That was the best you could say about those years they survived. And then Patrick turned 18. The social worker, a tired woman named Miss Rodriguez, who had at least tried to keep the brothers together, sat Patrick down a month before his birthday. "You know what happens when you turn 18, she said. "I age out. Yes, you'll be on your own. There are some transition programs, some support services, but—" She trailed off. They both knew the resources were minimal. What about Kyle? Kyle is only 14. He'll stay in the system until he's 18. 4 more years. Yes, Patrick felt something crack open in his chest. 4 years without Kyle. 4 years of not knowing if his brother was safe. 4 years of Kyle being alone, unable to defend himself, unable to advocate for himself. "No," Patrick said. "Patrick, no. We're not being separated. Not again. Not permanently. I understand how you feel, but can I become his legal guardian?" Miss Rodriguez paused. "That's complicated. Can I?" "Technically, yes. If you can prove you're capable of caring for him, if you have housing and income, if a judge agrees, then that's what I'm going to do." "Patrick, you're blind. Kyle needs round-the-clock care. The system won't just hand him over to what? Someone who loves him? Someone who's been taking care of him since we were kids?" Patrick's voice rose. "I'm more of a parent to him than anyone else has ever been. You know that." Miss Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "Then, let me see what I can do." The process took months. Court hearings, home visits, evaluations. Patrick had to demonstrate he could care for Kyle despite his own disability. He had to show he understood Kyle's medical needs, his equipment requirements, his daily care routine. The judge was skeptical. A blind 18-year-old taking guardianship of a paralyzed 14-year-old? It sounded like a disaster waiting to happen. But then Kyle testified. They brought him into the courtroom in his wheelchair, positioned him in front of the judge. The judge asked Kyle if he wanted Patrick to be his guardian. "Patrick's the only person who's ever really taken care of me," Kyle said, his voice clear and firm. "The only person who sees me as a person, not just a problem. We take care of each other. We always have. I know people think Patrick can't do it because he's blind, but being blind doesn't make you incapable. It just makes you different. And being paralyzed doesn't make me helpless. It just means I need help. Together, we can do anything." The judge looked at Kyle for a long time, then at Patrick, then at the file in front of her. "This is highly irregular," she said. "Against my better judgment, and with significant reservations." She paused. "Guardianship granted. With regular check-ins from social services. If I hear there are any problems, any issues with Kyle's care, this decision will be revisited." Patrick heard those words, and felt tears running down his face. Relief, terror, joy, responsibility, everything at once. They were free. Together. For the first time since their parents abandoned them, they were in control of their own lives. The reality hit quickly. Patrick's disability benefits were minimal. Kyle's were slightly better, but still not enough to live on. They couldn't find housing that was both accessible for Kyle's wheelchair and affordable on their tiny income. Landlords took one look at a blind 18-year-old and a paralyzed 14-year-old and found reasons to reject their applications. They lasted 3 weeks in a youth shelter before being told they were too old for that program. They tried a homeless shelter, but it wasn't wheelchair accessible. They tried staying with some people they'd known from foster care, but that lasted less than a week, and so they ended up on the streets. Patrick pushed Kyle through the city in his wheelchair, all their possessions in a backpack. They slept in doorways, under bridges, in parks when the weather was good. They ate at soup kitchens and shelters when they could. They scraped by on odd jobs, anything Patrick could do by touch, and Kyle could help coordinate by sight. Those first days were the hardest. The fear, the hunger, the cold, the realization that they were truly on their own, with no safety net, no backup plan. But they had each other. Patrick would push the wheelchair. Kyle would guide him. Left here, 3 steps, then there's a curb. Car coming from your right. Wait. They moved through the city like one person in 2 bodies. People stared. People pitied them. People sometimes helped, sometimes ignored them. But Patrick and Kyle kept going. Because what else could they do? Give up? Go back to the system and be separated? Never. We're free now, Kyle said one night as they huddled together under an overpass. It's us against the world. Patrick smiled despite the cold, despite the hunger, despite everything. Yeah, us against the world. 4 years. 4 years of surviving on the streets. 4 years of learning every soup kitchen schedule, every shelter rule, every place where you could sleep without being hassled. 4 years of developing calluses, physical and emotional, that let you keep going when everything said to quit. Patrick was 22 now. Kyle was 18. Still together. Still alive. That had to count for something. The morning after the rainstorm, Patrick woke with his clothes still damp and his body aching. Kyle was already awake, Patrick could tell by his breathing. "Morning," Patrick said. "Morning. How'd you sleep?" "Like a rock. A cold, wet rock." Kyle laughed. It was a sound Patrick never got tired of, proof that his brother could still find humor in their situation. They made their way to the Crossroads shelter for breakfast. The line was shorter today, and they got in. Watery oatmeal and weak coffee. But it was hot, and it was free. Patrick sat with Kyle, spooning the oatmeal into his brother's mouth, making sure he got enough. After breakfast, they lingered in the shelter's common area. There was a bulletin board with job postings, services, community information. Patrick couldn't read it, but Kyle could scan it for both of them. "Anything interesting?" Patrick asked. Kyle was quiet, his eyes moving across the board. Then, "Maybe. There's a flyer. Help needed. Elderly woman needs assistance. Cleaning out garage and sorting belongings. Light work. Will pay cash and provide meals. There's an address and phone number. Sounds too good to be true. Doesn't hurt to try." They borrowed the shelter's phone and called the number. A woman answered, her voice elderly but strong. "Hello? Hi, my name is Kyle. I'm calling about the flyer? For help cleaning out a garage? Oh, yes, wonderful. When can you come by? Today? This afternoon? That would be perfect. Do you need the address?" Kyle memorized it. They thanked the shelter staff and headed out. The address was in a nicer neighborhood, the kind with tree-lined streets and well-maintained houses. Patrick could hear the difference. Quieter, fewer cars, birds singing. They didn't come to this part of the city often. People here tended to call the police on vagrants. "This is the one," Kyle said finally. "Blue house, white trim, flower boxes in the windows. Nice place." Patrick found the front walk with his cane. pushed Kyle's wheelchair up a ramp — she actually had a ramp — good sign, and knocked on the door. The woman who answered was probably in her 70s. Patrick couldn't see her, but he could hear the surprise in her voice when she saw them. "Oh, hello. Hi, I'm Kyle. This is my brother Patrick. We called earlier about helping with the garage." There was a pause. Patrick was used to these pauses. People seeing his useless eyes, Kyle's unmoving body, and reconsidering. But then, "Yes, of course. Come in, please." She held the door wide, and Patrick navigated Kyle's wheelchair inside. The house smelled like old books and lavender and something baking. "I'm Margaret," the woman said. "I should be honest, I wasn't sure what to expect when you said you wanted to help. When I see you now, I'm not sure how this will work." Kyle's voice was cheerful, practiced. "Patrick's my hands and legs. I'm his eyes. We make a good team." "I see." A pause. "My late husband, Robert, passed away 2 years ago. He was a software engineer. His things are all in the garage: computers, equipment, years' worth of work files. I haven't been able to bring myself to sort through it all. It's too much, and I'm not as strong as I used to be." "We can help," Patrick said. "Just show us what needs to be done." Margaret led them through the house, Kyle giving Patrick quiet directions, and out to the garage. She opened the door, and even Patrick could sense the enormity of the space, cluttered with stuff. "Good Lord," Kyle murmured, and Patrick knew it was bad. "I know it's a lot," Margaret said. "If you want to reconsider." "We'll do it," Patrick said firmly. "But it might take a few days." "That's fine. I'll pay you by the day, plus meals. And, well, let's start with lunch. You both look hungry." She wasn't wrong. Margaret made them sandwiches, real sandwiches, with fresh bread and turkey and cheese, and they ate at her kitchen table. Patrick hadn't sat at a real table in a proper house in years. It felt surreal. Margaret asked about them, how they knew each other, where they lived. Patrick and Kyle exchanged a glance. Kyle could see Patrick's face, could read the question there. "How much do we tell her?" "We're brothers," Kyle said carefully. "We've been on our own for a while." "I see." Margaret's voice was kind, non-judgmental. "Well, you're welcome here. Robert would have liked you boys, I think. He always believed in helping people." They started working that afternoon. Kyle would survey the garage, tell Patrick what he saw. "There's a stack of boxes against the left wall, about 7 boxes high. Start there. The top 3 are labeled tax documents 1,995 to 2,000. Patrick would move the boxes, organize them according to Margaret's instructions. Kyle would spot things Patrick might miss, guide him around obstacles. They worked smoothly, efficiently. Margaret watched them, amazed. "You really do work well together." "We've had practice," Patrick said. Over the next 3 days, they came back. Margaret fed them lunch, paid them in cash each evening, and the garage slowly became organized. But something else was happening too. They talked, Patrick and Kyle answering Margaret's gentle questions, Margaret telling them about Robert, about her life. On the 4th day, Kyle noticed something. "Patrick, stop for a second. Look at this box well. You can't look, but feel this." Patrick ran his hands over the box Kyle indicated. "Books. Lots of them." "What are they?" Patrick asked. Kyle was quiet, reading titles. Programming books, Introduction to C++, Advanced Algorithms, Software Engineering Principles, Data Structures. "Robert's workbooks," Margaret said, coming up behind them. "He taught himself programming back in the early days of computers. Built a whole career on it." Kyle's voice changed. Patrick knew that tone. It was the sound his brother made when something caught his interest, really caught it. Would you mind if Patrick read some of these titles to me? I'd like to know more." "Of course. Take them home if you'd like. They're just gathering dust here." That evening, in their alcove, Patrick read titles and opening chapters aloud, while Kyle listened, absorbing every word. Patrick couldn't see his brother's face, but he could hear the intensity in Kyle's breathing, the focus. "This is incredible," Kyle whispered. "It's like It's all patterns, logic, problem solving. It's just math and language combined. You always were good at math, Patrick said. Could you read more? The next chapter? Patrick read until his voice was hoarse. Kyle never asked him to stop. Over the following days, they finished sorting the garage. Margaret was delighted, paid them generously. But Kyle couldn't stop thinking about those books. Mrs. Margaret, Kyle asked on their last day, would it be okay if we borrowed more of Robert's books? I'd really like to learn more about programming. Margaret looked at Kyle, at Patrick, at these two boys who had so little but still wanted to learn. Tell you what, she said slowly. Robert's old computer is in the garage too. It's outdated, but it still works. Why don't you take it? And all the books you want. Robert would have loved knowing someone was interested in his work. Kyle's face, Patrick couldn't see it, but he heard the emotion in his brother's voice broke into a smile. Really? We could? We could really have them? Of course. They left that day with a computer, 5 programming books, and more cash in their pockets than they'd had in months. But as they were wheeling away, Margaret called after them. Boys, wait. They stopped, turned back. Margaret stood on her porch, looking at them with an expression Patrick couldn't see, but Kyle could. What is it? Patrick asked. Where are you staying? And don't lie to me. Silence. Then Kyle, quietly, wherever we can. I thought so. You're too clean for street kids, but not clean enough to have a real home. She took a breath. There's an apartment above my garage. It's small, just 1 room, really, with a bathroom. It's been empty since Robert died. I could use help around the house, yard work, repairs, things I can't do myself anymore. And she paused. I could use the company. It's been lonely here. Patrick felt his heart stop. Mrs. Margaret, I know you don't have much money. That's fine. Help me with chores. That's rent enough. And call me Margaret, not Mrs. Margaret, just Margaret. Kyle was crying. Patrick could hear it in his brother's voice. You don't even know us. I know enough. You're good boys. You work hard. You care for each other. That's all I need to know. She smiled. So, what do you say? Patrick couldn't speak. 4 years on the streets. 4 years of cold nights and hunger and fear. And now this woman, this stranger, was offering them a home. Yes, Kyle managed. Yes, please, thank you. Margaret showed them the apartment. It was small, as she'd said, 1 open room with a kitchenette, a bathroom with a roll-in shower. But it had heat, running water, a real bed, windows with actual curtains. It was perfect. That first night, lying in an actual bed with Kyle in his hospital bed beside him, Patrick felt something he hadn't felt in years. Safety. Patrick? Kyle's voice in the darkness. Yeah? Did that really just happen? I think so. We have a home. Yeah, we do. And I have Robert's computer and books. Patrick smiled. You're going to learn programming, aren't you? I'm going to try. Will you help me? Read the books aloud. Of course. Patrick? Yeah? We're going to be okay. Really okay. I can feel it. Patrick wanted to believe it. For the first time in a long time, he actually did. Kyle devoured the programming books. Every evening, after they'd helped Margaret with whatever she needed, Patrick would read aloud while Kyle listened. Kyle would stop him constantly. Wait, go back. Read that section again. Memorizing every line, every concept, every example. Patrick had always known his brother was smart, but this was different. Kyle wasn't just learning programming. He was understanding it at a fundamental level, seeing patterns and connections that Patrick couldn't even explain back to him properly. It's like the code is alive in my head, Kyle tried to explain once. I can see it moving, changing, building on itself. Does that sound crazy? Knowing you? No. After 2 months of reading, Kyle said, I'm ready to try writing actual code. How? You can't use your hands. You're my hands. I'll tell you what to type. They set up Robert's old computer. Patrick sat at the keyboard, his fingers on the home row. Kyle dictated. Okay, type, number include is less than, IOStream is greater than. Patrick typed, slowly, making mistakes. Kyle corrected him patiently. Now, using namespace std, line by line, Kyle built his first program. It took hours. Patrick's hands cramped. But finally, okay, now compile it. Press F7. Patrick pressed the key. The computer whirred. Does it say anything? Kyle asked. Patrick leaned close to the screen, seeing nothing but vague shapes. I can't see it. Margaret had been watching from the doorway. She came over, looked at the screen. It says, "Build succeeded." Kyle let out a whoop of joy. Run it! Press F5. Patrick did. Margaret watched the screen. What does it say? Kyle demanded. Margaret smiled. It says, "Hello world." Kyle laughed, a sound of pure triumph. We did it! Patrick, we actually did it! It was the simplest program possible. But it was theirs. From that day forward, they coded every spare moment. Kyle's programs got more complex. Patrick got faster at typing. They developed a rhythm. Kyle would describe what he wanted. Patrick would type. Kyle would hold the entire program structure in his mind, debugging without even seeing the screen. Margaret became their cheerleader. She'd bring them snacks while they worked, ask questions about what they were building, tell them stories about Robert's career. He'd be so proud of you both, she said one evening. Especially you, Kyle. You have his gift for this. 6 months into their programming journey, Kyle said, I think we should build something real, something useful. Like what? Something we know, something we need. Kyle paused. Accessibility software. Patrick understood immediately. For blind and paralyzed people. Exactly. We know what works and what doesn't. We live it every day. We could make tools that actually help. They started building a screen reader that actually made sense, a voice-controlled navigation system, tools that worked the way disabled people needed them to work, not the way able-bodied programmers thought they should work. It took months. There were frustrations, dead ends, arguments. Patrick and Kyle fought sometimes the stress of learning, building, trying to create something meaningful while still struggling to survive. But they always came back together. Margaret watched their progress. One day, she made a phone call. There's someone I'd like you to meet, she told them. Richard. He was Robert's business partner. He's retired now, but he still knows everyone in the tech industry. Richard came for dinner. He was in his 60s, cautious at first, clearly skeptical about what Margaret had told him about these two boys. But then Kyle started explaining their software, the problems they were solving, the unique perspective they brought. Richard listened. Then he asked to see the code. Kyle talked him through it, explaining the architecture, the design decisions, the algorithms. Patrick couldn't see Richard's face, but he heard the man's breathing change, heard the growing respect in his voice. This is actually impressive, Richard said finally. Kyle, I've worked with programmers my whole career. PhDs, geniuses, people with every advantage. And you're visualizing system architecture in your head that most of them need whiteboards and flowcharts to understand. I don't have a whiteboard, Kyle said simply. So I had to figure out another way. Richard laughed. Yes, you did. He turned to Margaret. You were right about them. I'm always right, Margaret said primly. Richard became their mentor. He taught them about the business side of software patents, licensing, marketing, fundraising. He introduced them to his contacts. He helped them incorporate as a real company. Access Bridge Solutions. You're building bridges, Richard explained, between ability and disability, between the world as it is and the world as it should be. The name stuck. The first 2 years were brutal. They worked on Access Bridge while also doing freelance consulting work to pay bills. Patrick's typing improved until he could keep up with Kyle's rapid-fire dictation. Kyle's programs became more sophisticated, more powerful. They failed a lot. Software that didn't work, clients who didn't pay, pitches that went nowhere. There were nights when they wanted to quit. when it all seemed impossible. They fought during those times. Stress and fear bringing out the worst in both of them. "Maybe this is stupid," Patrick said, one particularly bad night. "Maybe we should just give up, find normal jobs." "What normal jobs?" Kyle snapped. "You're blind. I'm paralyzed. Nobody's hiring us for normal jobs. This is our shot. It's not working. So we make it work. We don't quit. We never quit." And they didn't. Margaret was their constant. She fed them when they forgot to eat, forced them to take breaks, reminded them why they were doing this. "You're not just building a business," she'd say. "You're building a life together. That's worth fighting for." She started calling them my boys. They started calling her Mom, Mama Margaret. It happened gradually, naturally. She became the mother they'd never really had. Their first Thanksgiving together, Margaret cooked a full dinner: turkey, stuffing, pie. Patrick and Kyle sat at her table, a real family dinner for the first time in their lives. Margaret looked at them, her eyes wet. "I always wanted sons," she said softly. "Robert and I tried, but it never happened. And now I have two." Patrick reached across the table, found her hand, squeezed it. "We always wanted a mom." Their third year, something clicked. They launched Access Bridge Pro, a comprehensive accessibility suite for businesses. It was everything they'd learned, everything they'd built, polished, and professional. A major tech company tried it. Then another. Then another. The orders started coming in. Real revenue. Enough to hire their first employee, a deaf programmer who loved their mission. Then another employee. Then another. Articles appeared in tech magazines. The brothers behind Access Bridge. Building accessibility from the inside out. How two disabled programmers are changing software. Awards followed. Invitations to speak at conferences. Recognition. But the best moment came when Kyle got his first powered wheelchair. They'd saved enough, finally, to afford it. Kyle could control it with his voice, move independently for the first time since he was 3 years old. Patrick heard the motor whir, heard Kyle laugh with joy as he zoomed around. Patrick, I'm driving! I'm actually driving!" Patrick grinned, listening to his brother's delight. This was why they'd fought so hard. A local news station did a story about them. Then a regional one. Then, finally, a national network. The segment aired on a Tuesday evening. The brothers who built Access Bridge. A story of survival and success. It showed their office, their employees, their software in action. It told their story, the abandonment, the foster care, the streets, Margaret's kindness, their determination. The video went viral. Millions of views. Messages of support from around the world. Patrick and Kyle, now 27 and 23, had actually done it. They'd built something real. Something that mattered. They never forgot where they came from. They donated to shelters, set up a fund for disabled kids aging out of foster care, hired employees that other companies wouldn't look at twice. And through it all, Margaret was there. They'd bought a house together, accessible, comfortable, theirs. Margaret had her own room, her own space, but she was family. She was at every business meeting, every celebration, every moment that mattered. "My boys did good," she'd say, and Patrick and Kyle would smile. They had. 5 years after that viral video, Access Bridge Solutions was thriving. They'd expanded to 15 employees. Their software was used by hundreds of companies. They'd won innovation awards, gotten patents, become minor celebrities in the tech world. But Patrick and Kyle still lived modestly. Nice house, yes, but not a mansion. Comfortable, but not flashy. They remembered the cold nights, the hunger, the fear they never wanted to forget. Margaret was 79 now, still sharp, still vibrant. She'd started attending their board meetings, offering advice, keeping them grounded. She joked that she was the company's chief wisdom officer. Then the national news network came back. "We'd like to do a follow-up story," the producer said. 5 years later. "How things have changed, how you've grown. It'll be a major feature primetime." extensive interviews. Kyle looked at Patrick. Patrick shrugged. Sure, why not? The crew came, filmed for 3 days, showed the office, interviewed employees, captured Patrick and Kyle working together, still the same rhythm. Kyle directing, Patrick typing. Their partnership as seamless as ever. The segment aired on a Thursday evening. Access Bridge Solutions, 5 years later. It was even bigger than the first one, more personal, more detailed. It showed their journey from homeless kids to successful entrepreneurs, showed Margaret and her role in their lives, showed the company they'd built and the people they'd helped. The video went viral again. Hashtags trending, articles written, millions and millions of views. Messages poured in. Support, congratulations, people sharing their own stories of overcoming adversity. And then, one Monday morning, Patrick got a phone call. The caller ID said unknown number. Patrick almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Hello? Silence. Then a voice Patrick hadn't heard in 20 years. Patrick? Is this Patrick? Patrick's blood went cold. He knew that voice. He'd tried to forget it, but some things you never forget. Who is this? Patrick asked, though he already knew. It's your father, Michael. Your dad. The office seemed to tilt. Patrick reached out, found the edge of his desk, steadied himself. Patrick, are you there? I'm here. We saw you. On the news. Your mother and I. We saw what you've done. What you and Kyle have accomplished. We're so proud. So incredibly proud. Patrick said nothing. We'd love to see you. Both of you. We're here. In town. At a hotel. Could we meet? Patrick's mind raced. 20 years. They'd been gone for 20 years. And now they wanted to see them? Kyle rolled up in his wheelchair. Who is it? He mouthed. Patrick covered the phone. Dad. Kyle's face went white. Patrick uncovered the phone. When? Whenever you want. Today? Tomorrow? Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Our office. Patrick gave the address. Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll be there. We can't wait to see you both. To tell you how much we... Patrick hung up. He and Kyle stared at each other. They saw the news, Patrick said flatly. Of course they did. They want to see us. Of course they do. Kyle's jaw tightened. What do you want to do? Patrick thought about it. The abandonment. The pain. The years of struggling. All the things their parents had missed, had chosen to miss. I want to tell them no. But I also want to hear what they have to say. I want to look them in the eye. Well, Kyle, you'll have to look them in the eye for me. And I want to hear how they justify it. Kyle nodded slowly. Okay, we'll meet them. Margaret should be there too. Absolutely. The next day, at 1:55 p.m., Patrick and Kyle waited in their conference room. Margaret sat with them, her hand on Kyle's shoulder. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. We know, Patrick said, but we need to. At exactly 2 p.m., there was a knock on the door. Patrick's heart hammered. Kyle said softly, It's them. They look old, smaller than I remember. Let them in. The door opened. Patrick heard footsteps, 2 sets, hesitant and uncertain. Patrick, his mother's voice, older now, breaking with emotion. Kyle, oh my God, look at you both. Look how grown up you are. Patrick stood, facing the voice. Kyle stayed in his wheelchair. His face, Patrick couldn't see it, but he knew cold and evaluating. Sit down, Patrick said. Not warm, but not hostile. Yet, they sat. Patrick heard chairs scraping, rustling. Who's this? His father asked, noticing Margaret. Margaret, Kyle said. Our mother. Silence. Then, your mother? Yes. Kyle's voice was hard. She's been our mother for the past 8 years, since you stopped being our parents. Kyle, their mother started. Let them talk, Margaret said quietly. You came here. Let them say what they need to say. Patrick's father cleared his throat. We saw you on the news. We've been watching your company, reading about your success. We're so proud of you both." "Proud," Patrick repeated flatly. "Yes. What you've accomplished despite everything. It's incredible." "Despite everything," Kyle echoed. "You mean despite being abandoned by our parents?" "It wasn't like that," their mother said quickly. "You have to understand, those were such dark times. We were so young, so overwhelmed. 2 children with special needs, the medical bills, the stress. So you left us," Patrick said. "We didn't know what else to do. We were drowning. We couldn't cope. We thought you'd be better off with people who could handle it. Professionals." "Professionals?" Kyle's voice rose. "You left us in the foster system. We were bounced from home to home, bullied, separated, and then we ended up on the streets. For 4 years. Was that better?" "We didn't know," their father said. "The system wouldn't tell us where you were. We tried to find you." "No, you didn't," Patrick interrupted. "You could have found us anytime. The system would have told you. You just didn't want to know." Silence. "We've had a hard life too," their mother said, her voice small. "After we left, things fell apart. Your father lost his job. We struggled. We've been barely scraping by. Living in a tiny apartment. Working minimum wage jobs. It's been so hard." "And," Kyle said coldly, and we thought, maybe now that you're doing so well, maybe we could be a family again. Maybe we could help with the business. Be part of what you've built." There it was. Patrick felt something settle in his chest. Clarity. "You want money," he said. No, it's not like that." "Yes, it is," Kyle said. "You watched us on TV. You saw we were successful. And you thought, hey, maybe our sons, the ones we abandoned when they needed us most, maybe they'll take care of us now." "We're your parents," their father said. "You deserve nothing," Patrick said, his voice cutting. "You were our parents when we were children. You chose to stop being our parents. We were 7 and 3 when you made that choice. We're adults now. That relationship is over. But we're family." Margaret stood. "No, I'm their family. I was there when you weren't. I watched them build this from nothing. I saw the nights they worked until they couldn't see straight well. Patrick was already blind, but you know what I mean. I saw them struggle and fight and refuse to give up. Where were you?" "We didn't know how to help them," their mother whispered. "So you helped yourself instead," Kyle said. "You left us in that house, alone. Patrick was 8 years old and blind. I was 4 years old and paralyzed. And you just walked away. We were scared." "So were we." Patrick's voice cracked. "We were terrified. We were children. We needed you. We couldn't handle it. So you think we could?" Kyle leaned forward in his wheelchair. "You think an 8-year-old blind kid and a 4-year-old paralyzed kid could handle it better than 2 adults? But we did. We handled it. We survived." "You don't understand," their father tried. "No," Patrick said firmly. "You don't understand. We're not angry anymore. We're not even hurt. We're just done. You made a choice 20 years ago. We're making one now. We don't need you. We don't want you in our lives." Their mother started crying. "But we're your parents. You can't just—" "Yes, we can," Kyle said. "You taught us that. You taught us that it's okay to walk away from family when things get hard. So that's what we're doing." "But we're struggling," their father said. And there it was again, the real reason. "We saw that you're successful. We thought maybe you could help us. Just a little." "No," Patrick said. "That's not our problem. You made your choices. You have to live with them. Just like we had to live with yours." Margaret walked to the door, opened it. "I think it's time for you to leave. Please," their mother begged. "Give us a chance. Let us explain." "You already explained," Kyle said quietly. "You explained 20 years ago when you left. Everything after that is just excuses." Patrick stood, walked to where he sensed his parents were, his hand finding his father's shoulder. Not affection location. "I forgive you," Patrick said. "Both of you. I'm not carrying anger anymore. It's too heavy. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean we owe you anything. You gave up the right to be our parents a long time ago. He stepped back. Kyle's wheelchair motor hummed as he moved closer to Patrick. The brothers united. "Goodbye," Kyle said. "Don't contact us again." Their parents sat there, deflated, the truth finally sinking in. They'd come looking for successful sons who might support them. They'd found two men who didn't need them anymore. Their father stood slowly. Their mother followed. They walked to the door, their footsteps heavy. At the threshold, their mother turned back. "We really are proud of you," she said softly. "For what it's worth." "It's worth nothing," Patrick said. Not unkindly, just honestly. They left. The door closed. Patrick, Kyle, and Margaret stood in silence for a long moment. Then Margaret started crying. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know they're your parents. I know that must be—" "No." Patrick moved to her, wrapped his arms around her. Kyle rolled close, pressed against both of them. "You're our mother. You chose us when they didn't. You believed in us when we had nothing," Kyle added. "My boys," Margaret whispered, holding them both. "My beautiful boys." They stood like that for a long time, the three of them, a family forged not by blood but by choice. That evening, back at their house, Margaret insisted on cooking dinner despite their offers to order in or have their housekeeper handle it. "It's been an emotional day," she said. "Cooking helps me think." So Patrick and Kyle sat in the kitchen, listening to her move around, the familiar sounds of home. Richard stopped by. He did that often now, had become like an uncle to them. Some of their employees joined too, Sarah, who was deaf, and Marcus, who had cerebral palsy, and Jen, who was on the autism spectrum. They'd all become more than coworkers. They were chosen family. Dinner was loud and warm and full of laughter. Stories were told. Plans were made. The company was launching a new product next month. They were hiring 3 more people. There was talk of expanding internationally, but mostly it was just family being together. After dinner, Patrick wheeled Kyle to their favorite spot, a window seat overlooking the backyard. Patrick couldn't see the view, but Kyle could, and he'd described it so many times that Patrick could picture it perfectly. "Tell me what you see," Patrick said, like he always did. "The sun setting. The sky is orange and pink. There's a bird on the fence, a robin, I think. The leaves on the maple tree are turning gold. Fall's coming. Pretty?" "Yeah, really pretty." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "Hey, Patrick." "Yeah? Remember that night? In the alcove? When it was raining?" "Of course. Did you ever think we'd be here?" Patrick thought about it. The cold, the hunger, the fear. And then Margaret's flyer, the garage full of computers. Kyle's brilliant mind finding its purpose. The long, hard climb to success. "With you," Patrick said finally, "I knew we'd end up somewhere. We're always somewhere together." Kyle laughed softly. "That's not really an answer. It's the only answer that matters." Margaret joined them, settling into a chair nearby. She put her hand on Patrick's shoulder, reached out to touch Kyle's face. "My boys," she said quietly. "Mom," they said in unison, and all 3 of them smiled. They'd been abandoned by the people who were supposed to love them unconditionally. They'd survived a system that didn't know how to care for them. They'd endured years of homelessness and hunger and hardship, but they'd found each other in the darkness. Patrick had been Kyle's hands and legs. Kyle had been Patrick's eyes. Together, they'd been whole. And then Margaret had given them something they'd never thought they'd have again. A home, a mother, a family. Not the family they'd been born into, but the family they'd chosen. And who had chosen them? Outside, the sun finished setting. The stars started to appear, which Kyle described in detail, because Patrick couldn't see them but loved hearing about them anyway. Inside, surrounded by people who loved them, Patrick and Kyle were finally, truly home. Not because of where they lived, but because of who they lived with. They'd built something beautiful from nothing. Not just a company, not just success. They'd built a life, together, and that was everything.